Welcome to episode 3 of No Art School. Today I'm sharing my process of studying a piece by Max Ernst, a German painter from the 1800s, and his work titled Chimera, which I think means bell in Italian maybe. And I'm just checking Max Ernst out on Wikipedia, and it's really funny because he is my polar opposite on the astrological wheel. He was born April 2nd, and I'm an October 2nd Libra. He was an Aries. And he died in Paris, France. Maybe I was him in my past life. I don't know. And his work was Surrealism, Dadaism. He was a pioneer of the Dada movement and Surrealism. Whoa, that's really cool. I was attracted to his book because it was one in the library at Trestle. And I just flipped open, I think, to a book, forget the title, but it had a few pieces by him. And I'm just like stuck on him. I'm fascinated by his style and voice. So he had no formal artistic training, but his experimental attitude towards the making of art resulted in his invention of frottage, a technique that used pencil rubbings of objects as a source of images, and grattage, an analogous technique in which paint is scraped across the canvas to reveal the imprints of the objects placed beneath. He's also noted for his novels consisting of collages. This is a really cool guy. I wonder what this is. One of his notable works is called A Week of Kindness. Une semaine de bons. I wonder what that is about. I'll have to check that out. Ooh, really beautiful illustration of like a woman kissing a man with like what looks like bat wings. So yeah, in this current work, I'm doing what I've kind of grown up doing, which is studying famous pieces of art. And this helps me because it's kind of like taking in all the information that this artist did. It's kind of like the antique way of learning under a master who has mastered their craft of painting. And what apprentices would do is copy the work stroke for stroke. So I'm trying my best to match everything, but it's actually kind of challenging with this one because it's so simple. It's such a simple and beautiful and elegant piece of artwork that I'm having a challenge, like really getting through it. But I'm taking it day by day. And now it's kind of like I'm on the details. So the devil's in the details, as they say. And I am certainly working through those. With this palette, I feel like I get to really look at the tones of my own flesh. The background is black. I started on a white canvas, just one of like the cheap ones that's like half a centimeter. One of my jackpot wins from Trestle when I first moved in, as I discussed last episode. And the brushes, I don't know the exact sizes, but I'm using a very small brush for the details, like trying to get the highlights. But as you see throughout this video, I keep circling back, revising every stroke because I want the colors to match. And I'm having kind of a hard time like striking that perfect balance on such a simple yet beautiful object. One thing that I'm painting on, if you could see my setup, this is like typical me in my studio. On the walls, I've got hung a bunch of finished work. And then I currently have like the 2 easels covered in larger pieces. And there was a really kind man who was packing up. He and his wife moved back to Taiwan, and he like left a bunch of art. So I saw, like, upon going to the studio a few days after he was gone, that he had left the ceramic piece and no one had taken it. So I was like, this is mine. And it's really cool. There's like, I don't know what it's meant to be, but I think it's like the cosmic serpent because on the right side of it, there's a bunch of palm trees. And on the left side, it's like a closed fixture of some kind. But I also found another little ceramic item today. It was like a little vase, just still had its sticker underneath. It wasn't like dusty or anything gross, but on the way to the studio, I was like, definitely need this because I have some, I'm a street finder. I'm a street. I won't say a troll because I love what I find on the street, but like once I was on my way to work at Indochine or like leaving or getting a check or something, and I found this like large bouquet of colorful plastic flowers, and I think that they had been used for a shoot of some kind. It's right at Astor Place, so something exciting was happening. There's like a few flower shops there that way as well. But I've been really inspired by this concept of like rainbows. And if you could see in this work, it's a bit subtle, but you know, I've used all the primary colors, red, yellow, blue, and working to blend those to where it's still like it informs the eye of depth. Something that I've yet to really find a way to access and use at my disposal as a tool in my own work. But as I do studies, drawing, it comes out far easier for me in drawing because I feel like I know how to push the pencil correctly. And then sharpening, keeping the pencil sharp is also a very important part. It's kind of like the same concept of keeping enough mixing dissolvent on your brush or enough paint on your brush. Something I also struggled with for a while. And funny enough, the first few years that I was painting it, I've used like acrylics, watercolors, and once I started using oil, I didn't know what I was doing. So I just used linseed and relied on that for quite some time. But linseed slows down the drying process. And I actually did take one semester of like first level painting at Truman, which I did not, I appreciate it for what it's taught me to teach myself, but you know, I just have that sense of dissatisfaction of like I didn't really attain like pieces that went into a portfolio. I more so got the sense of like, okay, I'll be my best teacher, I guess, and that did serve me, but at the same time I would not pay for that again. I wouldn't pay for the experience to happen a second time. First time was once enough. But yeah, I remember I had like an art job, one of three, while I was in my last semester of college at Truman. And maybe it was Dave, maybe it was someone else. It might have been a professor at the New York Artists League, actually. One of the two. But they were like, oh, you need to keep paint on your brush. Make sure that you have paint on your brush. And I was doing this thing where I was wanting to save paint because I was like, this is expensive stuff. Like, it's just costly to keep art supplies in my reservoir, and making sure that I have enough to create a present piece of work is a good life lesson. And that's also a big reason why I like fine art so much. Is I was taking drawing classes every semester in college. I think I started after my like freshman first semester. Maybe it was like the spring of freshman year, maybe sophomore year fall. But I was getting so many downloads before I even knew what it was. Like my professor would be explaining this like principle or concept of working with shadow, light, and I was taking these as like deep truths of life and existence. So in it's hard to explain in like English for me. It's more so easily explained whenever I'm like actually painting. But just taking these principles and learning to apply them to my perception or the way that I go about trying some new idea in my life, whether it's like keep enough paint on your brush, stay present in the moment, don't try and think about the paintings that you'll make down the line, because what if this is the last painting you'll make, you know? Like learning to balance my present and put my best efforts into what I'm doing in the moment is a lesson that painting has taught me for sure. And with this piece specifically, it's just like a lesson on values. Like I'm not being as uptight about the lines and making sure everything's like properly done. It's something that I kind of am like, okay, there's two lumps on the like wing that lead to the breast. I got those good. Like what I'm working on now is bringing that up and showing that that's closer to the viewer so that my perspective will eventually gain traction in the other works that I make. And as far as what I was listening to, I started out listening to a few different musicians today because I was wanting to be sure that I like keep myself fresh. But I find that the way I focus best is when I'm listening to someone discuss like astrology or spirituality or these concepts that allow for me to kind of like get into deep focus. For like the first painting I made, I did binaural beats. I was in Paris, and this was like a commission for a very important collector, and I just wanted to do my best job. It was for Ronald Lauder, and he owns the New Gallery, which is like a Klimt and Schiele kind of like Austrian art museum in the Upper East Side of New York. I didn't get very much money for it, but like it stands out to me, and it was a great lesson on what I can achieve as far as like focusing, because it was one of these paintings where like I took a picture of it when I initially started the work, and then like a few weeks in, and it was just like this spectacular growth. It was something that consistently got better. And that's why I'm so hyped about just like trying something new with this daily, weekly activities. Some weeks are better than others, but now that it's kind of warm and sunny outside, I feel better creating and showing up for myself first, and then to share my talents with my loved ones. So this piece is one of like the first that I'm going to go for, which is just like seeking to like sell replicas from fine artists. But if not, like I'm making some small changes here and there to where it's like a learning experience, but still an original piece of art. With this one, I don't know, I might have to add like on the top left corner of the instrument, there are like three little like knobs, which I am considering is like a saxophone because I don't know what a chimera actually looks like, a chimera. But yeah, as I work on this piece, I'm just kind of like wanting to gain a sense of like I'm learning from a master of his craft. And funny enough, my polar opposite on the astrological wheel, and he has a lot of really crazy works that I saw, and I was just blown away by, like L'Ange du Foyer. I'm looking on his Wikipedia page now, and it's just like this really beautiful image of like this creature flying in the sky with a lot of really crazy details. So I'm excited to see what more I can learn with him. And yeah, tonight is my first night of this art critique group. So I'm filming this a day before I post it. Or yeah, I'm recording my voice a day before I post what I'm going to share with you guys tomorrow. But I'm really excited. Like I have my post-it notes. The works I took were from my series on the Kentucky Derby. And I painted those upon returning to New York from my art vacation that was like 5 months that ended in Torino. And when I got back to New York, I had gotten a publication from Airbnb, and there were photos of like the original jockeys from the Kentucky Derby because it was about that season. And it was a fascinating read because I'm from the Midwest and I've never heard of the truth behind the Kentucky Derby, but the racers were like children of slaves, and the people who would take care of the horses were slaves themselves. And I think like the first few years, the races were just black racers, and these men went on to achieve like celebrity status pre-Jim Crow era, and they had their spotlight revoked whenever there were various racers who were like, we won't race with black people. And it was sad because a lot of the jockeys turned to alcoholism to cope with like having a dream crushed and just being robbed of opportunity that they had rightfully worked for and deserved and earned through their labor and, you know, doing something that they loved. So I have to discuss like in 2 sentences my research on these works, which is backtracking quite a bit. But since we're in retrograde season, there's all of the energy in the world to do exactly that. And as it's another example of me painting from a photo, I have like several approaches to art. One is when I'm just channeling, I'm just painting, I see what happens. The second is whenever I'm painting from a photo, and then that splits off into like group A, group B. Group A is when I'm painting from a photo and doing my best to replicate it stroke for stroke, shadow for shadow. I might add a little something, but I want the image to be as close as possible. Then there's this group B that I'm kind of getting more confident with, which is like I'm working from a photo, but then I just start adding in things. Like it's funny to just say that, but with the kiss painting that I did of my friends Dame and Mari, it's just like I understand that there is so much detail in the photo that was taken of them, and like they are just so stunning that I can only do so much. And what I do will be my very best, and that's all I could do, quite frankly. But outside of like replicating from photos, the lesson in those is just kind of like matching forms, but also creating and like expressing this feeling that I get when I look at this image. My friend Kim, she and I worked together a few years ago. I had posted an earlier version of this painting, this study by Max Ernst called Chimera. Oh, and here's something that I'm doing now. I am having issues in a certain area of detail, so I'm getting out the pencil, and I'm not the best at doing this, but when I do it, it's like surgery time. It's like, okay, what is happening here? How can I break this down a little bit better? So I'm going in and I'm going to try to match what I see to my drawing, because in a way it kind of like reminds me of like where I'm shooting, where the shadow is, because it's like kind of like putting a puzzle together, but at the same time you're making the puzzle. So you need to know in location. For me, I work as like in location to what is this object, in location to what is that object, and it works. It helps me. It's just that I can get a little lazy when it comes to drawing, because it's like slower and more of a process of like, okay, how much have I been messing up? It forces me to see all of my mistakes, and I can be a perfectionist to a certain degree. Like for the most part, I'm not. But then in other moments, it's like I can't see anything else but a mistake. So learning to temper that has been a really good lesson on self-love. And even tonight, like I'm avoiding sitting and getting my 2 sentences written down perfectly. Like I'll probably be writing this on the train after I finish this recording. Like, what is my research method, and how do I work and study? Like those as questions in themselves, they're so complex, because it's like for a long time I've been painting on my own without any sort of guidance, and I truly have not ever had I just saw like the largest fly in my life just fly by the window. I've never had to get like be I can't say rigorous, but constructive in explaining how I make what I make. I've tried it here and there, but it's such an internal process to me. It's like I'm whittling wood in the back, and I'm going to show you it in a few months. But for a few months, you just aren't going to hear from me, except for when I'm really hungry and want to hang out with you. Shout out to all my friends who still love me. I know you still care. But anyways, I have to hone in on like where did these images come from, basically. And to be honest, like I know it's good for me, but it's like eating the broccoli or the kale raw in your smoothie when you're just like, why couldn't I just saute? Okay, so my GarageBand keeps telling me that it couldn't process all of the data in the time, but I am back. Aside from growing and developing new ways to understand myself, because a lot of art is like sharing of my innermost thoughts, the deepest, darkest chambers of my mind and what I've felt really uncomfortable with, which I learned at the other art fair, was being public about my art, which is weird because it's like in my mind I've been so like neglectful of my inner child, which is like just have fun, be happy with the things you make. Like there will be times where I don't post work to my website for months, and it's like, it's just sitting and I'm contemplating how all these mistakes are everywhere in the painting and I didn't do a good job. And then meanwhile, I'm like not painting anything new. And it's just kind of like in the past few months, I've had the time to be more reflective and aware of my process. So like in my months of avoiding the studio, because I seriously got a few free months with my first studio, but I've just been hesitant, or I've found other things to do to keep myself busy. And that's fair because life can get like that. But also when I think about what I'd like to leave behind, which is like an amazing body of work for my nieces and nephews, and one day if I have kids, my kids to feel inspired by and to know that they can do it too. These are things that I wish to pass on. And I don't know, Max Ernst, like he kind of came out of the blue, but it seems like we have quite a bit in common. Obviously I could do more research on the guy, but so far I feel really like I'm trusting that his work spoke to me for a reason. But my friend Kim, back to that, she gave me this really beautiful compliment of saying that the body of this object, the Chimera, looks like a Black woman. And I think that, yes, wow, I can't speak anymore. Symbology, in a metaphor, it's like a winged musical instrument and the colors are skin tones, but at the same time it's like I understand that this is going to help me, but I wonder if Max Ernst was thinking of Black skin when he was painting this painting. Not that it's wrong if he wasn't, but it just feels like that sense of like invisibility, no recognition, like a complete absence of presence when it comes to people of color in artworks. And I discussed this in my last episode that portraiture was reserved for the wealthy. And if you got your portrait painted, it's like you had a cell phone back in like the early 1700s before there were even bicycles. Which I read on this website that like bikes were considered like the peak of transportation. And that was kind of like a shift in the paradigm for me reading that, living in an era of cars, scooters, skateboards, the weird like plank of wood with one wheel that I see people like zooming on throughout Midtown and like areas where I'm like, ooh, I would really not want to ever try this. Brave people, they live on the edge. But yeah, I hope that in this work people can see their own beauty reflected, and also I know that one day I'll be able to capture the differences in tones with the sense of like depth that he did. And I know that comparison is a thief of joy because Max Ernst was like a pioneer of a movement, but it's cool to know that he was self-taught and he started a movement on its own. Like in this frame, you could see two objects. One on the right is like a small plank of wood. I had this sitting in my studio for several months, and I finally decided that I needed a proper way to like hang completed works that aren't stretched yet, because my preferred method of painting, it's a lot of love, it's a labor of love, but I like prime an unprimed canvas that's loose, and from there I stretch. And my friend Isabel, she helped me at the other art fair like stretching before hanging works that were like on display for the public. And I think that the best like techniques that have been done has been like the help I've gotten from a friend who was helping me to like stretch works. I got my first drill last October, and I actually left the charger to that thing in Bushwick, so I really got to go pick that up. But I was building this like hanging shelf, and the drill died midway through as I was like flailing because I was really trying to cut corners with time. Like it was a first day of going into the studio after like this like severe like Eeyore mode where every day was rainy, and this video series is helping me to get out of that downward spiral of feeling like nothing is moving, like I have no opportunities, and every corner I turn there's like it's a closed exit, it's a dead end. Because painting is something that has been a labor of love for me as well. And then the painting to the right, basically there's a plank of wood hanging works that I haven't stretched, and on the right there is a painting that's kind of covered by that like my small magazine clipping that's like 2 rainbow journals with some jewels on it. But it's a piece of work that I started before my art vacation, and I'm calling it an art vacation because I met someone who called their like jazz trips jazz vacations. But it was really a good life experience to travel on my own and to have friends there to catch me at every turn because I truly did need it. But that one, I have a friend who came to my studio, and he gave me really great advice about, his name is Dan Kribitz. I'm trying to find his Instagram right now. It's like Dan Kribitz 8 on Instagram. But he was like, you should totally just paste this painting, because I had one that was unsuccessful. Like half of it was awesome, and it was one of the paintings I started when I came back from Indochine that was like, because I paint several works at a time, it ran alongside the horse painting. So I was like doing this like kind of tame, loose word, tame. The paintings that from photos where it was like the type A, where I was like doing my best to get stroke for stroke, but then that's when I kind of started veering towards like type B, where I'm like adding stuff and just like making my own colors happen because I want to express something that's unique to me. These paintings, by the way, are not finished because I'm unhappy with them. I don't know if they're successful or not yet, but with this painting specifically, it was like before or just about the time where I left Indochine, where I felt like such a prop. I felt like I didn't want to be this item of like sexy beauty, and instead I wanted to be a human who felt proud of what she was able to accomplish and achieve. And I'll have to show you guys maybe in another video some work in my studio, but these women are like naked and they kind of look like sex robots. That's what they're supposed to be. And I pasted that directly onto another painting that I had like genitals of woman body exposed, like it's swimming. So I like painted this vision of like a woman at the bottom of the ocean, which is kind of me. And you could just see her like spread eagle. So I like pasted this over to kind of create some PG art. Not entirely, but almost. Anyways, this is so new for me, and my voice is like feeling itself. I'm gonna have to have a tea or something before this evening begins, but I'm excited to see a new community, to feel a sense of like having people who know what I'm going through, have been there in their own respects, and have either worked through it with creative solutions that I've never heard of, or stuck it out and found their way.